If you bought a MacBook with an Intel processor in the last 5 years or so, it's safe to say you got a bit unlucky with timing. 2024 will mark 4 years since Apple switched to making their own processor chips, starting with M1 in 2020. These are now the only sorts of Macs they sell. Let's go over how long each laptop is likely to last you, whether you're planning on buying it or you have one already. The first Intel Macs came out in 2006. Early Intel MacBooks, those before 2010, each featured some pretty weak processors. If you own a 2006, 7, 8 or 9 MacBook, you have a CPU with a maximum of 2 cores. This includes the Pro 13s, 15s and 17s, MacBook Airs as well. In fact, everything but the Mac Pros of that era. These machines have notably older Wi-Fi and Bluetooth versions, really slow ports including USB 1 and FireWire, graphics several 100% worse than modern laptops even, and more. For those reasons, it's safe to say that these computers aren't good for too much in 2024. Let's just leave them at the start of the 2020s here. If you're purely writing documents and working with photos or similarly undemanding tasks, you should be fine for a couple more years. These devices aren't going to be too hot on video editing though, and they'll certainly struggle to run the latest OSs, even patched. Gaming is virtually out of the question. I'm going to stick the 13-inch MacBook Pro and Air 2010s in the same boat actually. They won't cut it this year, even for most casual users. The 15 and 17-inch MacBooks were the first to have quad-core processors though. They also had really nice matte display options, upgradability for sticking an SSD and a lot more RAM inside. I think it topped out at 8GB, but that's enough considering the GPU and CPU aren't killer. Patching the OS to Sonoma is still doable, but I think the average user will find these things are pretty hard to use going into 2024. Remember, a lot of the 2010, 15 and 17-inch machines would develop GPU problems and die without warning. The 2011 MacBooks are a bit of a unique case, as many of you will be aware. The 2011 MacBook Pro 13s are not the most powerful machines. They're very heavy, which is also an issue. Their CPUs have just 2 cores, and of course there's only weak Intel graphics on board. If you're shopping for one of these, try your best to find a Retina 2012 instead. You'll love the screen and be thanking me later. If you have one already, I think, again, 2024 is the end of the road. The furthest any 2011 MacBook will go natively is to macOS High Sierra, which is coming up to 7 years old now. Sonoma won't work well on these. MacBook Air 2011? About the same. But if you're a writer or student, you might be able to push it a bit further, since the body is really small and light, even compared to modern machines. 2011 15 and 17-inch laptops are a no-go. Their quad-core i7s are very capable chips, not far off the 2012 in performance all round. The graphics on them are unfortunately poorly engineered, leading to certain failure on every machine. The main cause is overheating, which puts extra stress on the poorly soldered chips. Disabling the dedicated graphics is possible since there are integrated ones that'll work too, but this leaves the machine weak and not worth buying in my opinion. Let's be honest, if you're using a 2011, 15 or 17-inch machine, there's a very imminent risk of the thing dying, which is just not worth it now, is it? Let's leave that one back in 2011. Now, 2012 was an interesting year for MacBooks. 2 all-time greats were released. The Unibody 2012 was the final member of the Unibody family. By this point, Apple had dropped the 17-inch form factor due to dwindling sales and the shortcomings of the 2011, but the 13 and 15-inch remained. The 13-inch sported dual-core i5 or i7 CPUs with up to 16GB of user-upgradable memory. There were 2 SATA ports, one normally filled by the DVD drive which could actually be removed to fit another hard drive in the machine, and one with the main hard drive in. I give the Unibody 13 until 2025 to stay usable. The Unibody 15 from 2012 had very capable i7 CPUs and some formidable graphics in the form of the GT650M made by Nvidia. The card holds up decently in 2024, so I'm going to say this machine will be usable until 2026 at minimum. As for the Retinas, well, since these aren't upgradable, you do have to make sure you get the right spec first time, and do try and get one without too many battery cycles. Once that's out of the way though, I'd rank them the same as the Unibodies. Buy a Unibody to save some money, buy a Retina to stay more portable and benefit from a nicer screen. The 2012 MacBook Airs are actually fairly usable too, since they have similar parts to the Pros. Again, thanks to the extreme portability here, they should be usable as office or note-taking machines until 2025, but no further I should think. All 2012 MacBooks got updates until macOS Catalina, which came out in 2019. On to 2013. In fact, the 2013 and 14 MacBook lineups were quite similar. I can see this video getting seriously long if I'm not careful, so let's lump them into the same segment. 2013 and 14 MacBook Pros all followed in the steps of the 2012s with Retina screens and solid-state storage. They all had maximum RAM capacities of 16GB, and the 13-inch models came with dual-core i5 or i7 processors, with the 15s getting quad-core 4th-gen i7s. The graphics cards were the NVIDIA GT750M on the dedicated 15-inch machines. The 750M was something of a marginal upgrade to the 650M on the 2012. These laptops both got updates until 2020's macOS Big Sur, which I must say runs pretty smoothly for most going into 2024. If you need to update behind Apple's back, consider it easily patched, with the OpenCore Legacy Patcher enabling users to work around right up to Sonoma. I'd imagine these machines would make it into 2026 comfortably. Let's say the end of that year at minimum. The 2013 and 14 MacBook Airs were an interesting bunch, with 11 and 13-inch options, each with a myriad of different configurations. These are definitely still decent machines, assuming you use one for basic office tasks, just so you can have a light laptop in class or at work. I'd give these until near the end of 2025. Right, 2015 was a good year for MacBooks. Mostly. We saw the reintroduction of the MacBook. Not a Pro, not an Air, just a MacBook. These were super light and didn't even have fans, which was unheard of at the time. My last video is actually all about these. Anyway, a 2015 12-inch machine is likely to keep you going until 2026 latest. They're weak performers, but with that sort of portability, it's nice to have something you can truly take anywhere. The 2015 MacBook Pro line was a real treat. The 15-inch models had fast quad-core i7s boosting up to 4 GHz and were configurable with AMD graphics, specifically the M370X, which had 2 GB of DDR5 video memory. 16 GB of RAM was standard, which still comes in handy these days. The flash-based SSDs were user upgradable too. I have no hesitation in saying these things will keep you going until 2027. Video editing is still doable, and these are portable music production monsters. The 13-inch 2015s were stuck once again with dual-core processors, but bear in mind the screens are still very impressive even now. Let's give them until 2026. Monterey was the latest update any 2015 machine got, but as long as you're fairly technologically able, you'll be able to patch yours up to Sonoma and possibly beyond with the OpenCore Legacy Patcher. This can save a lot of Macs from the dumpster and save you money as well. The 2015 MacBook Airs paved the way for the next 2 years of the lineup. They were stuck with dual-core processors and were just about enough. Little changed from 2013 to 17 in the world of MacBook Airs actually. Let's give the 2015s until late 2025. 2016. Boy, a lot of people were pretty annoyed when Apple released their 2016 MacBook Pro lineup. No more USB-A, SD card, HDMI or MagSafe ports. A lot of people skipped 2016 to 2020 MacBooks just because of how controversially not user-friendly their key changes seemed to be. MacBook Airs sold in 2016 were exactly the same spec-wise as the 2015s, so I'd say end of 2025 once again. Back to the Pros, and I'm afraid since they're not upgradable and very expensive to repair, I'm going to have to give them until 2026 absolute latest. The 13-inch models might struggle to limp past the end of 2025 with their dual-core CPUs, as we've seen on older MacBooks. These are nice machines, designed beautifully, but flawed with poor thermal performance and barely an upgrade to the 2015s. 15-inch 2016 Pros came with fairly decent AMD 455 and 460 GPUs, but the heat is a consistent issue regardless of the spec. 2016 brought a little spec bump to the 12-inch MacBook lineup, as well as an improved keyboard, but still not enough to merit them useful past 2026 at absolute best. It's safe to say Apple played it pretty safe in 2017, not making any big changes to the existing MacBooks. 2017 13 inches were the final MacBook Pros to have dual-core processors. For that reason, as well as them being stuck with just 2 ports at base configuration, I'm not expecting these to cope much past 2026. I'm going to say 2026 for the 15-inch as well. No huge changes. RAM wasn't offered above 16GB, and for the money, they still don't raise any eyebrows. The top and final spec of the MacBook 12-inch was released in 2017. Did anyone care? Not really. The processor was still dual-core, the graphics, RAM and battery life uninspiring. It's another 2026 machine. Unless you have a serious need for the tiniest MacBook around, I wouldn't want to own one right now. MacBook Airs had their final iteration of metal screen bezel design in 2017. They hadn't changed on the outside since 2008 essentially, so it was time to move on. Very minor upgrades were added to this machine, with dual-core i7s still an option, just not particularly desirable with all middling graphics and memory performance. 2025 might again be the end of the road here. If you want a super light laptop of near this caliber, buy a 12-inch Retina. Right, it bores me to talk about 2018 MacBooks. There was a Pro and an Air, no 12-inch. The 15 inches got i9 options with 8 cores for the first time, which was big, but they notoriously overheated a lot and thermally throttled performance in order not to fry their own boards. Graphics were marginally improved Radeon 560X at top spec. For 2018 this wasn't exactly pro grade though. 2026 is most likely going to be the year these things have to be packed away and sold for most people. Their heat issues will become abundantly clear when the patched OSs we run on these things are too demanding even at idle. The 13-inch 2018 Pros will get you to 2026 as well, provided you're not buying them for graphics, obviously. Intel MacBooks are known to only have beefy GPUs on their bigger models. 2018 saw a redesigned MacBook Air, one which looked incredibly similar to the Pro, actually. This design takes us back to 2015 when this ultra-thin and sleek-looking USB-C only design came in first. Dual-core i5 chips, as well as surprisingly poor battery life, makes these a bad buy even at today's prices. Word to the wise, buy an M1 MacBook instead. The 2018 Airs will get you to the start of 2026, but it won't be pretty. Okay, 2019 MacBooks had a lot of hype around them, and for good reason. There were 13 and 15-inch models released in early summer. These had DDR4 memory, and the 15 inches had pretty damn good AMD Pro Vega 20 GPUs at top spec. They were once again let down by seriously poor thermals though. These things would throttle at the drop of a hat. I'm sad to say between 2026 and 2027 is where these things will take you at best. They're expensive to upgrade, so be careful not to pay too much if you're buying one now. Later in the year came the 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro. At top spec, this had 8 cores on an i9 processor boosting up to 5 GHz, and excitingly, an AMD 5600M graphics card with up to 8 GB of HBM2 memory. Apple really tried to stay classy with Intel and AMD parts here. Heat was a problem, but not the world's biggest. Should you buy one today? I don't think so, as they're expensive and not up there with M1 in performance. If you own one though, I think you'll manage to get to the end of 2027 with it. You're not going to get macOS support past Sonoma, most likely, but there may be workarounds over the next couple of years. MacBook Airs from 2019 were basically the same as the 2018s. 2026 at best for them. You heard me. They did look good, but so do the M1 Airs, and they'll last you a lot longer. Right. In 2020, Apple staged a competition of sorts with Intel. They sold MacBook Pro and Air computers with Intel chips inside, alongside ones with their own Apple M SoCs. Considering they haven't sold another Intel MacBook since 2021, it's fair to say that, as the name suggests, Apple M won. Yeah. The 2020 Pro and Air MacBooks will not get you past 2027 and 2026 respectively, I'd say. Alright, so what about Apple M1 in 2020? Well, it's very difficult to guess, but the first Intel Macs had 6 to 7 years of lifespan, roughly. The MacBook Pro 27 got updates until 2015's El Capitan, an 8-year tenure on the latest macOS version. I would estimate Apple M1 to last you until 2028 comfortably, if not squeezing its way up to 2030. M1 graphics weren't superb, so that might be what holds you back. This is all speculation, and 15 minutes! Okay, I'll have to speculate some more in another video. Thanks for watching, of course, and if you're into old and new Mac content, subscribe so you don't miss the next video. If you want to support the channel financially, my Patreon is $3.99 and linked in the description down below. See you next week.